Hello, this is Mike Knudstrup, and today we're covering another segment of topics related to principles to management. I'm adding to my video collection on YouTube. Today we are discussing personality, that combination of characteristics or traits that influence a person, and personality or traits are relatively enduring characteristics that don't change a whole lot over time. The concepts that I'm covering are out of Robbins and Coulter management textbook. One of the best-selling management textbook and textbook authors there are. But the concepts really should be fairly universal. Wherever you're studying principles of management or organizational behavior, you should be able to find most of these topics. Topics we're going to get into are the Big Five model of personality, most common among or accepted among personality researchers. The MBTI, or the Myers-Briggs type indicator, very popular in industry. Locus of control, be that being internal or external locus of control. Machiavellianism, labeled after Niccolo Machiavelli, and in Italian, I suppose you could say philosopher, around the early 1500s. And then emotional intelligence, or EQ versus IQ, stereotyping, and the halo effect. So I would say most people are interested in personality, and trying to figure out, why do people do the things they do? Why is it useful to understand personality? Well, first off, why do people do the things they do? And how do they get their personality? Most people will say it has some combination of nurture, their upbringing, their surroundings, their experience, versus nature. Nature being, their DNA. Their DNA, or their genes. And obviously, personality is a very interesting topic. Researchers have been looking at it, talking about it for thousands of years. General consensus is probably somewhere around 50-50. Both are important. Nurture versus nature. They're both important, probably about 50% each. Some very influential studies have been the separated twins studies, where they looked at twins that were separated at birth, and they find that these individuals, even though they were brought up in different locations, had no contact, often had very uncanny similarities. So, it's probably about 50-50. And of course, why understand personality? I don't think it's for to be more judgmental of others, but to understand how others perceive us and relate to us, and how we can more effectively deal with others. But also, to understand ourselves. When we understand ourselves, we can find situations that work better than others. And I'll get into that a little bit as we go along here. All right. Among personality researchers, the most commonly accepted personality characteristics are those in the Big Five. Introversion versus extroversion. Do you get your energy being around people, or are you a little more of a private person and get more energy from being alone? And of course, again, usefulness of personality is in figuring out maybe where people fit, where we fit. And extroverts, all right, often on you definitely wouldn't want to be in an occupation where you're stuck in a corner working in an office with little contact. Maybe people are highly extroverted, be attracted to things like sales. And even managers can be fairly extroverted. Agreeableness, are you good-natured, cooperative, and trusting? What types of professions might that be best for? I would say customer service would be an excellent area for people who are high on agreeableness. And then I sometimes ask students, well, what about disagreeable people? There's a place for everybody in this world. And one of the common answers is, well, probably lawyers. Lawyers are paid to to create arguments and to win. So I would tend to agree with that. Disagreeable people, maybe high in disagreeableness might be people, lawyers, trial lawyers, for example. Conscientiousness, responsible, dependable, accurate, achievement-oriented. And conscientiousness, as a personality variable, has been found to be the #1 predictor of job success. So if you are high on conscientiousness, that can be a good thing. I also saw a recent article, a recent study, where that the conscientiousness of your significant other or your mate or your spouse predicted how well you did financially. Because conscientious, at least in theory, the author said, at least in theory, conscientious partners are more careful with their spending. So conscientious folks may be attracted to detail work, for example, like accountants might be conscientious. Of course, you can always be too much of a good thing, and sometimes overly detailed or conscientious folks, I think, sometimes lends itself to being a little bit obsessive compulsive. What do we call it? Obsessive compulsive. OCB, obsessive compulsive behavior. You find yourself checking the door at night several times or making the bed several times, maybe you got to dial back a little bit on conscientiousness. If you're a little bit of too perfectionistic, maybe a little too conscientious. All right. Emotional stability. Are you the same from day to day, with the people you interact with? Calm, enthusiastic, secure versus emotionally unstable. I would say emotional stability would be very important for managers, for example. If you've ever worked around people who are happy one day and sad the next, or very hard to read, those folks are often hard to work with. And so, how about emotional instability? There's a place for everybody. And I think people who are emotionally unstable, often are really good artists, aren't they? Remember Van Gogh cut his ear off, for example. A lot of our great artists, comedians, actors tend to have their demons, but they focus or they channel that energy into their artistic endeavors, which relates to the final big 5 characteristic: openness to experience, imaginative, artistically sensitive. And again, artistic people probably are attracted to this, or creative pursuits. Maybe like advertising. A challenge for people high on openness to experience is that they have trouble with routine. Doing the same thing every day is tough for people high on openness to experience. All right, that's the Big 5 model. Most commonly accepted characteristics among personality researchers. Out in the industry, the Myers-Briggs type indicator is very popular, and I've got 3 screens for this, a couple coming up, so I won't focus too much on this one, but you're either E or I, S or N, F or T, feeling or thinking, perceptive or judgmental. Judgmental, this term is a little misleading. We'll get into that in a second. But that means how many different personality types are there? If you've got 2 different dimensions, 4 times, or 2 to the 4th power, how many different types would we have with Myers-Briggs? If you answered 16, you were exactly correct. All right, so let's get into these parts a little bit, and maybe you can take a miniature MBTI test here on my next screen. And again, the MBTI is very popular out in the industry. Hundreds of thousands of MBTI personality questionnaires are done every year, often in the industry. Okay, try to classify yourself here, either as an introvert or an extrovert. Very quickly, E versus I. How do you take in information? S versus N. Like, I want to know what's in front of me. I want to see it to believe it. All right, you're more of a sensing versus intuition. You come up with ideas, from the gut, and just these notions that you tend to believe. Maybe you tend to be more of taking information more of an end point of view. How do you make your decisions? Are you thinking logical, reasonable, rational, critical, or are you more accepting, accommodating, and tender, and F? And men tend to be a little more T. Come on, my little pointer here. Than F. Alright, judging. I really don't like this term because I think it's a little misleading. It implies being judgmental, and really it just means like you live your life systematically and in a planned and scheduled way, versus perceiving. You kind of take things as they come, a little more seat of the pants, spontaneous. So you ask a person, well, hey, do you want to do something Saturday afternoon? And if they say, well, how about you get a hold of me, say, Saturday around noon, and then I'll let you know. That would be a perceiving type person. If they say, well, let me look at my planner or see how things look, and then I'll pencil you in because they have the next 6 months of Saturdays penciled in, that's more of a J type. So you should have picked these out, and then my next screen is a little tough to read. I tried to get the best screen I could, but you should have your type, like ESTJ, for example. Very common type. Alright, next screen, a little tough to read, but you can go to Type Talk and get more, or really just type in your type, and you'll find all kinds of great information on the internet. Well, like if you're an ESTJ, very common type, they are life's administrators. ENTJ, life's natural leaders. Alright, let's see some of these others. ISTJ, doing what should be done. Okay. ISFP, sees much, shares little. ISTP, I believe, ready to try anything once. All right, these are a little hard to read. I understand. I want to get something up there. But if you put your type in and do a Google search, you'll find all kinds of information. And I have to admit, it's hard to get a perspective on how others see us. We live in our own mind every day, but the Myers-Briggs type indicator really can give you a perspective on how others see you. And also, that data has usually been accumulated or aggregated from thousands of people with your personality type. So very insightful and really low cost or free information. All right, Myers-Briggs type indicator. Some other personality characteristics. Locus of control. What causes the events that occur in my life? Or if you have an external locus control, really it means that most everything occurs, or the majority of things occur in your life. It's just luck. It just happens to me. I don't know why it happens. I just have bad luck. Or, well, sometimes they say, I just have good luck. Internal locus control means I am the cause of things that happen in my own life. They're more likely to think that they control their own destiny. Again, maybe this is about understanding more than judgment, but if you work with people with an external locus of control, it can be really challenging because they have a hard time being accountable. There are always things that happen outside of you that cause the events to occur. Maybe you have good strategies. I'm interested in your comments on what do you do to get people to take accountability for their actions when they have an external locus of control. As a landlord, I get to hear a lot of different excuses why people don't pay their rent. Some of the more funny ones, I think, are, well, you didn't show up on Friday, so I spent it. I would say that's an external locus of control. But I try to get people to write down their promises to get them to be a little more internal or follow through on what they say, and then try to get them to focus, well, what could you have done, or what can you do to be more external? To be more internal in their locus. People with internal locus control tend to take better care of their health, but I think you can have too much of an internal locus of control. Sometimes things are outside your control. All right. Yesterday, I promised my students, I had made at least a tentative promise that I would get this video up yesterday. and I did not. I've been having some car issues. When you've got a 1995 Dodge Caravan, that's to be expected, I suppose. But on Sunday, I tried to get it fixed again, pumped more money into it, couldn't do it. So yesterday, I finally broke down and got a newer van. And I like to believe my word is good, but I didn't keep it. But when you're driving around a 1995 Dodge, I don't know. Some parts of your life are just out of your control. I'm hoping to take care of that, though. I did get a car. All right. Another personality characteristic is Machiavellianism. Machiavelli was a bit of an Italian philosopher. He viewed himself as, I suppose, an educator. He wrote a book called The Prince on how to gain and keep power. And he said, you know, more or less, the ends justify the means. You know, you can be devious if necessary, or you're going to have to be devious if necessary to hold power. He also said, don't get caught, because trust takes a lifetime to build and you lose it in an instant. But perhaps part of the element of Machiavellianism is awareness and understanding that there are people that are somewhat Machiavellian in the world, and that they're going to be a little devious about things, and to be careful in our dealings with them. When I ask students about who tends to be Machiavellian, oftentimes they say politicians probably tend to be a little more Machiavellian, come on, pen, than others. All right. And just to know who you're dealing with and to be careful. I've also heard that real estate agents tend to be a little Machiavellian. Not sure about that one. And then again, is it nature versus nurture? If they are they adapting to their clientele, or is that type of person attracted to it? All right. Anyway, understand that there are those folks out there, and to at least be careful until we give them a chance to figure them out. Okay, another personality characteristic I want to get into is emotional intelligence, and we often want to compare that EQ versus IQ. What's more important? IQ being your cognitive ability, and emotional intelligence being these things right here. Are you self-aware of what you're feeling? Can you manage what you're feeling? Are you aware and have empathy for what others are feeling? So obviously emotions are important here. And can you handle the emotions of others? And then finally, self-motivation. Can you defer gratification? Okay, so this topic became really popular in the 90s. A man named Daniel Goleman, very famous for EQ, or emotional intelligence, wrote a best-selling book. He's wrote follow-up books. There's all kinds of stuff on EQ out there. Back to my first question here. What do you think is more important, EQ or IQ? If you look these over, we put a high emphasis on IQ in this world and being able to solve problems. And being able to think logically, but people tend to believe that EQ is more important than IQ. And if you look at these, you might say, yeah, well, these cover a lot of ground. These are pretty broad. So yeah, I can understand that. IQ actually has been shown to predict only about 5% of career success. So EQ generally thought to be more important than IQ. So if your IQ isn't off the charts, if you've got a high EQ, you'll still do quite well. I mean, there's been famous people whose IQ maybe hasn't been outstanding. John F. Kennedy, well respected anyway by a lot of people. Supposedly his IQ was 120, which is good, but definitely nowhere near genius or off the charts. Another element of IQ here I want to talk a little bit more about is the ability to defer gratification. And if you want to see a funny video or kind of an interesting experiment on the ability to defer gratification, look up the marshmallow experiment. on Google, and probably the first thing you'll find is a TED Talk, TED Talk, by Joaquim de Posada, where the marshmallow experiment is where they have kids in a room, and they have one little marshmallow in front of that kid. There's a researcher who's there temporarily, says, to this 4 or 5 year old kid, all right, if you want, you can eat this one marshmallow right now, or I'll be back in about 15 minutes. And if you can wait 15 minutes, I will give you a second marshmallow. And so the video is pretty funny. It shows these kids struggling back and forth, back and forth. Some of them eat the marshmallow, I believe about 2/3, and some of them are able to defer gratification. The original Stanford experiment found that those kids that could defer gratification were in a much better place 10 to 15 years down the road. Education, relationships, sports, career, those kind of things. Just a simple little marshmallow experiment had great predictability in how kids turned out. So the ability to defer gratification being probably very important and something all of us should exercise, perhaps on a regular basis. Look up the marshmallow experiment, Joaquim de Posada, I believe that's how it's pronounced. It's a YouTube TED Talk. All right, emotional intelligence versus EQ versus IQ. A couple final topics here I want to get into about, I guess, personality. One being stereotyping and the other being halo effect. These seem similar, but they're slightly different. Stereotyping is placing someone in a group based on a few observable characteristics. For example, if I said, all right, tell me what a good worker looks like, you might say, okay, well-groomed, shows up on time, wears nice clothes. All right, and so boom, you put that person in the good worker stereotype. You see them, it's hard to know how people do at work, right? I mean, a lot of times you don't really know how good people are. But you look at a few characteristics, say, good worker, on time, well-groomed, dresses well, good worker. Or sloppily dressed, poorly groomed, shows up late, bad worker. All right? And I think the part of the idea about this is to be aware of our stereotypes. Because the opposite of stereotyping is to look at every individual as totally unique and different. And there's no way, given all the people we come in contact with on a daily basis, we can do that. You just can't. We don't have enough experience with them, and our brains just couldn't handle that. So we tend to stereotype. We put people in groups. But for us, I think the key is that we have an awareness of what we're doing, and that our stereotypes are amenable to change, that we're open to changing them. The halo effect is slightly different. This is something they found in the human resource world, where as a part of performance evaluations, if you've ever done a performance evaluation that has more than 3 or 4 elements to it, 10 or 15, there's going to be things in there like, I don't really know. Creative problem solver, you might ask, is this person a creative problem solver? Well, I'm not really sure, but I rated them a 9 out of 10 on everything else. So the halo effect says, you'll probably give them a 9 as well, even though you're really not sure. That's the halo effect. So when you got most of the other criteria or parts of an evaluation for somebody, but you're missing 1 or 2, and so you just go with the flow, stay with what you got. Halo or horns. Horns is the other way around. You rate them just about a 1 or 2 on everything else, like, oh, gee, I don't really know how technically savvy they are, for example. So everything else is a 1 or 2. I'll give them a 1 as well. Halo effect. Again, the idea with both of these is that, that we have a certain awareness of them, of what we're doing. Okay. So that that finishes up this segment on personality and related to my principles of management and organizational behavior set of videos on YouTube. Remember, we covered the Big 5 model of personality, the Myers-Briggs type indicator, locus of control, Machiavellianism, emotional intelligence, EQ and IQ, and stereotyping versus the halo effect.